Hello and welcome to another Star Wars: Old Republic video. In this one I'm going to be giving you kind of an overview of how I like to do my scoundrel healing or operative healing depending on which side you want to play it on. So yeah, where should we start? Let's start with the simple stuff and let's look at what we're doing for gearing. So generally gearing is not going to be too overly complex. What you're going to want to look at is we're not going to be adding any stats to give us accuracy. That's absolutely useless for a healer, barring very weird circumstances. And really we're going to be looking at alacrity and critical. So these numbers are not fixed numbers that you need to get to exactly. Generally what you want to be doing is scrolling down, figuring out what alacrity you want to be at. There's different thresholds that allow you to get different levels of energy management on top of the generic GCD. So yeah, I picked a random number. This is what I've been working with. Probably not the number I'd suggest. I really would have liked to have actually gotten a little bit lower. I just didn't quite have the right pieces to swap out to get it to that point that I was looking for with a little more crit rather than quite this much alacrity. But again, just play around, test them out, see what you like, and that's how you're going to figure out what works best for you. Generally though, you are going to be using more alacrity than you're going to be using critical, and I would suggest being over 10% alacrity. So yeah, gearing, pretty simple. You're basically just looking to put in a whole bunch of crit and alacrity, and that's about it. When it comes to our legendary items, we're going to be using Locked and Loaded Package and Tactician Package. For our tactical, I like to use Diagnostic Probes. This is my favorite one. It allows you to have a little bit more burst healing for those emergency situations. As far as the relics go, you do have a bit of flexibility here. I am using Power and Mastery relics, so they have a 30% chance to proc. So that's the Serendipitous Assault and Focused Retribution. If you did want though, you could use Relic of Devastating Vengeance, which give you critical, and you'd use this in place of the one that's for power. The next thing we want to look at is our ability tree in the combat style window. So here we have both the Imperial and the Republic side. You can see Imperial on the left side for your choices, and we can see Republic on the right side. So level 23, our first choice, you're going to be taking Medical Burst almost hands down the whole time. This allows you to do an insane amount of AoE heals by targeting yourself with Underworld Medicine and healing all allies within 8 meters of you. You could use Defensive Medicine if you know for absolute certain that you're not going to be using Underworld Medicine as an AoE heal. Clever Surrender, you're going to want to take this one no matter what. There's just nothing else worth taking in that tree. When it comes to 39, you're going to be taking Kolto Mark the majority of the time. Do note that this means that your Kolto Cloud will cause all healing that you do to that target to be increased for about 6 seconds. So make sure that you're using this to start off a big amount of healing on the tank or something like that. It's great. But if you don't want to be taking this one because either you're like me and you quite often forget to cast Kolto Cloud on the tank, or he's not in the right position for it and I cast it on myself instead, the other great choice would be Nutrient Rich Technologies. The cooldown of Pugnacity is reduced by 2 seconds. When it comes to 43, there are a few options here. Healer's Edge will give you a flat, just kind of 5% increased healing. That does sound great, but in most things, you're going to have way more healing than you need anyways, because of just how many raw heals you're pumping out. So that 5% isn't always the best thing. I really like taking Hawk Streak, and that allows me to have a little bit more of that oh crap burst kind of healing. 51, Scar Tissue, increased damage reduction. There's really nothing else worth taking in this tree. Keep Cool is definitely the one I would suggest for taking at 64. 68, you do have a couple choices. You can definitely take Trick Move, which will give you extra mobility, and more importantly, it grants extra upper hand or tactical advantage when you use it. This is a great one. But if you know that you're going to be using a lot of that Underworld Medicine for that AoE heal on yourself, you're going to be swimming in the stuff, so it's not really as useful. So optionally, you could take Flash Grenade, which would basically provide kind of a DCD. 73, again, you get some choices. Realistically, you're going to take Back At Ya or Blow for Blow. These are just so much fun to have, but there are some times where it makes way more sense to be taking Scramble, as you're not really going to get any advantage out of Back At Ya. Here's kind of the loadout that I'm currently playing around with myself. Alright, let's take a look at how this plays out in terms of our abilities that we're going to be using and which ones you're going to want to put on your bar. Alright, so let's take a look at the healing abilities that I have on my bar, and we'll just guide you through kind of their basic use before we get into more complex stuff later in the guide. So first off, you're going to have Kolto Cloud. This is an AoE heal, and it's going to heal everything within 10 meters of the target you put it on. It's a heal over time, so the healing is not instant right at the beginning. It also provides a great buff, which all healing received is increased for all targets that get hit by Kolto Cloud. Next, let's look at Kolto Pack. Kolto Pack is undeniably your best single target heal you have. It is channeled though, so you have to be careful to make sure that you know you have enough time to use it, but it's going to be the highest amount of single target healing per GCD. Third, let's look at Underworld Medicine. Underworld Medicine is a longer channel, so it's not as effective as a single target heal, but most of the time that we're going to be using Underworld Medicine, we'll be using it on ourselves with the ability tree choice that allows us to AoE heal everything within 8 meters of us. So this ability has become like kind of the kingpin. What makes this class do so well is when you can stand within 8 meters of a lot of people, cast it on yourself, great AoE heals, and it can also be used for reasonably good single target heals as well. Slow release med packs, these are kind of the bread and butter of the class. You want to put 2 slow release med packs on multiple targets, and then you just keep refreshing those occasionally throughout the fight to make sure that they stay up on targets at all times. Emergency med pack, this is kind of your burst single target healing. It takes very little energy at 5 energy, but the healing that it does is not that great, and it consumes upper hand or tactical advantage. The last single target heal that we have is Diagnostic Scan, and it does 2 things. First off, it's a free heal, so it doesn't cost you anything, and as you'll notice, it also was making my energy go up much faster by using it. The last healing ability that we're going to talk about is Kolto Waves. Kolto Waves used to be a big part of AoE healing with the Scoundrel, and it's not anymore because Underworld Medicine is just so good now with Medicinal Burst, and you get a much better AoE heal. In every way, it's superior to Kolto Waves. Let's talk about a couple other small things that we might have as a healer that are important to notice. Heart Trigger Patch, this is your combat res. You absolutely need to know where this is. It's very important to note that when you combat res somebody, you will get a debuff applied to you and you're locked out of using your combat res. If both healers try and res the same person, they're both going to get the debuff and be locked out. So it's very important as a healer to discuss with your other healer who's going to res first, so you don't end up both having a lockout and only one person getting resed instead of having 2 reses available. Triage your cleanse. As a healer, you have to know where your cleanse is. Make sure you have it hotkeyed to something that's very easy to hit so you're not looking around on your bar to find it in an emergency. You're also going to want to know where your dodge is, as well as defense screen. So defense screen is going to work against any type of damage, and dodge is only going to work against specifically melee and ranged attacks. If in doubt, just use defense screen. You definitely want to have pugnacity on your bar. It gains you a tactical advantage or an upper hand, and it also boosts your alacrity for 15 seconds. And really great, it makes Kolto Pack or Underworld Medicine an instant cast. Cool head, this is just when you need some extra energy. Yeah, so once you're pretty much drained, tapped out of resources, use your cool head to get back up. If you did take Hot Streak, make sure you have it on your bar. It resets the cooldown of Pugnacity and a couple other abilities, as well as giving you additional mastery for 15 seconds. So again, you're getting a lot of additional perks to burst your healing up a lot higher. And if you are taking Flash Grenade, you have that on there as well. And then the raid buff. This is not specifically healing related. The other ability that's really great and quite fun with this is the Scamper. So basically a roll. So make sure you have that on your bar. It's great. A lot of fun. You do have the ability to stealth out of combat. Not quite as useful as it used to be. And the last ability is just having your interrupt. Again, interrupt should always be hotkeyed somewhere that's very easy to click.
I know this is important.
Now let's take a look at what we actually have for offensive abilities when we have some spare time to do some additional DPS, or we're just playing outside of a group. The most important and best ability that you definitely want to have is going to be Bushwhack. This is a great ability. It's an AoE. You can set it anywhere. If you have something targeted, you can just double click it to have it go down. The great thing is you can do other stuff while this ability is out. It does not prevent you from using other things. So think of it like an AoE damage over time. Vital Shot, this one is a dot. It's 18 seconds long. Generally when you're in a group, you're going to want to dot the boss whenever you have a little bit of free time. Don't worry about using the dot and refreshing it a little bit early. So, if you only have 5 seconds left, but you have a downtime to be able to reapply it, you might as well, because you don't always know that you're going to get another downtime soon to put it back up. And if you can't keep it up 100% of the fight, don't worry about that either. It's not vital. You're a healer, not a damage dealer. We also have Blaster Whip, which is just, fairly short cooldown for a higher level of damage. And then if you're behind a target, you can use Back Blast. Back Blast is definitely a better ability to use, dealing more damage and granting you tactical advantage or upper hand. It has twice the length of cooldown as Blaster Whip though, so that's the main disadvantage. All 3 of these DPS abilities cost 15 energy, which can really add up. So be very careful about overusing your energy while trying to do DPS. And that's where Flurry of Bolts comes into place. Flurry of Bolts is 30 meter range, absolutely free, and it's my main go-to. So I will dot up the boss if I know my dot's not on them, and otherwise just Flurry of Bolts is the only thing that I use. Unless I really don't need to heal, then I'll be looking at doing some Blaster Whip and Back Blast. Just keep in mind that I'm probably going to run out of energy when I have to swap back to healing. If we are in an AoE heavy situation where you don't need to heal too much, again, we're going to start off with our Bushwhack, and then Thermal Grenade is my preferred one, followed by spamming Lacerating Blast. It is a fairly small conal to hit the enemies with, so just be very careful about making sure that you're maximizing the enemies you're hitting, and as you can see, our energy really does go down there. So those are the main abilities that I would suggest putting on your bar. Alright, so let's talk a little bit about the philosophy behind healing on a Scoundrel operative and kind of some of the things you want to think about. So first off, slow release med packs. These are the bread and butter of the operative or Scoundrel healing class. You can put up to 2 stacks on a player, and then at that point you can just refresh both stacks if you get some in time before that buff falls off. They passively heal over time, and when they're refreshed efficiently, they are extremely energy efficient on the healing. But if you let them fall off, you're going to have to reapply both stacks, and they lose a little bit of their effectiveness. Additionally to that, they grant you upper hand or tactical advantage on the imp side. So it's important to keep slow release med packs on multiple targets so that you're constantly generating upper hand or tactical advantage throughout the fight. Generally, I find that you want to be putting stacks on at least 3 players throughout a fight, because you can also gain upper hand by using your Underworld Medicine, and if you're using Underworld Medicine on yourself to AoE heal the group around you, or for single target heals on a player, you're going to be generating extra upper hand anyways. 3 players is usually enough for your slow release med packs. If you find that you're not going to be using upper hand too frequently, then you're going to want to look at maintaining stacks on 4 different players instead of just 3. So our general healing setup is we're going to make sure that we're putting Kolto probes on at least 3 targets, if not 4 targets, before we do any kind of actual fighting. Certain fights will allow you to put slow release med packs on more than 4 players, because of the way the damage comes out, and over time you'll start learning how to do this effectively by memorizing which fights the damage profile works well for this. But this isn't going to be the case with every single fight. There will be lots of times where you do not want to put more than 4 packs out, because the more packs you have out, the more time you have to spend refreshing those packs rather than actually spending time providing valuable single target or AoE heals. Now, how do we go about maximizing our slow release med packs? Well, the important thing is to think about how can we refresh the 2 stacks without letting them fall off, so we only have to use 1 GCD or 1 ability to be able to refresh them, rather than having to put 2 new stacks on a player all the time. Your most energy efficient and best way to refresh slow release med packs is going to be your emergency med pack. This should be your first go-to, as it only costs 5 energy, but it comes with the downside of consuming some of that upper hand that you're generating from your slow release med packs. It's great though because that energy cost is so low, and it will provide a little bit of an additional heal if that player needs it. If you don't have the spare upper hand or tactical advantage, your next option is to simply just put another slow release med pack on that player. But it does take 10 energy instead of only taking 5 energy, and you get no additional healing from it. The other option that we have is if a target actually does need healing, Kolto Pack also refreshes slow release med pack, but it does have a little bit of a channel time, so it doesn't refresh it at the beginning of the GCD. And it also takes a lot more energy at 20 energy. So make sure you're only using Kolto Pack to refresh the slow release med pack when that player actually needs to take some healing. Whenever we can refresh them with surgical probe, it's going to be our lowest energy cost, but it does require that we have tactical advantage up to be able to use it. And in addition to that, when you need to do a large heal, you could be using Kolto Infusion on that target to refresh it as well. So now that we know the general idea of how we want to keep slow release med packs on players to keep up the actual amount of upper hand we're gaining, as well as providing some passive healing if those players do take damage, let's talk about how we keep track of our slow release med packs. So right now you can see that I've been using my ops frames to select people for healing. And generally it's a little bit hard to see the buffs on the players to be able to keep track of them that way. So a better option is to look at your own buff bar here, and you can make sure that you refresh the slow release med packs on yourself first, and then go in order through the group, refreshing them so that you know all of them are tied to when yours is about to fall off. So now I can be busy doing other things, whether that be doing AoE damage, whether that be doing some other healing, and when my packs start getting pretty low, I can just start going through the chain and refreshing everybody's, whether that be using a emergency med pack for energy efficiency, a slow release med pack, or using a Kolto pack because they actually do need that extra healing. This is a great way when you don't want to set up star parse and set up raid hots overlays. So what exactly are raid hot overlays? So if I open up star parse, whenever you actually choose to use the parsing ability, you will have a bunch of different overlays that you can turn on that will be over top of you. So if we go under interface here and we turn on raid hots and we unlock our overlays, this will now appear. I can now take this raid hot overlay and I can move it so that it covers the area where my actual operation frames are going to be in the game. And if we have a larger group, I can also expand and collapse this depending on the group size that I need to keep track of with my raid HOTS overlays. Now I can't use it right now to show you because we're in combat, but when I apply HOTS to myself and other players, it's going to auto-populate a name in each one of these fields. So what would happen is if I look at the order that my operations frame is in, and I go from the top left corner and I go down 4, that's one operations frame, and then I'd move over right to the next column, go down 4, that's another frame, it's going to auto assume that's the order I put them on in. And if I get any wrong, it's not a big deal. All the names, you can click them, drag them and drop them, move them around, rearrange them as the ops frames gets changed, or if you just put them on the wrong order. This is really useful. So if we pop open start parse and we go back to our overlays and we lock our overlays, now it's going to be out of the way, you're not going to see it. And what will happen is in the top left corner of each frame, once you put your HUD on, you'll see a green box that's going to show 1 or 2, depending on how many stacks of slow release med packs you have on a player. And it'll show a countdown to let you know how much time is left on the slow release med pack, so you know when is the optimal time to refresh it. And I just want to say a quick thanks to these volunteers who joined me from Fleet to help me film this little section here. So thank you again for coming, standing in my stronghold, and letting me show players how this works with the different operation frames and the slow release med packs on different players. Let's take a little bit of an example that's a bit more simple, and we're going to talk about a single target healing situation. So generally this is going to be the tank or a DPS who has threat needs a lot of healing in a very short period of time. We're also going to do this from the assumption that you have Kolto Mark, so generally you should already have some upper hand on your character from having your slow release med packs, and so your primary target suddenly takes a bunch of damage. If they have enough health to survive for at least, a few more GCDs, and you don't need to heal them up immediately this GCD to prevent them from dying, you can start off with a Kolto Cloud to get that buff that's going to give an additional 20% healing taken, and then you're going to go straight into a Kolto Pack. That's the first thing you want to buff with that. It's also going to buff your emergency med pack critical chance, so I would say that your next ability should be an emergency med pack to take full advantage of the buff that we got from Kolto Cloud for 20% additional healing. You have 2 more GCDs, kind of. So you have another GCD plus the beginning of the second one. This means that if you're using diagnostics probes, that you need to have 3 stacks to make your underworld medicine an instant cast. So this puts us in a little bit of a weird situation when we're looking at using diagnostic probes. Now, if you absolutely have no stacks built up already from the tactical, you're going to have to make sure that you're using your underworld medicine after 1 emergency med pack, because otherwise that buff is going to fall off before your underworld medicine finishes. That big burst heal is going to look like recuperative nanotech, Kolto infusion, 1 surgical probe into Kolto inject. Now we could be using stim boost to make Kolto inject an instant cast, and we can also be using 3 surgical probes, getting the stacks required to make an instant cast Kolto injection. Now when we talk about how we want to use pugnacity in this gives us some nice things. So yeah, we can do our Kolto pack as just a regular one, and then we can use pugnacity to make an instant cast, and then we can get the full amount of benefit. We can go into 3 emergency med packs, make an instant underworld medicine after that. And again, remember, if you're close enough to the target that you want to heal and you cast underworld medicine on yourself, it's going to heal everything within 8 meters of you. Yeah, you can totally cast underworld medicine on yourself instead of that target and get the benefit of that AoE healing as well. That's pretty much your single target healing. You just have to be careful with underworld medicine is spammable. It's your best single target heal while Kolto Pack is on cooldown, but it will use a lot of energy, so generally that's why emergency med pack is something that I will spam a lot while doing single target heals. And of course you always have diagnostic scan, but generally diagnostic scan is for periods of low healing requirements to help you recuperate your energy, and not when you need to burst heal somebody. This is why we have cool head, is if I need to frickin' spam a whole bunch of underworld medicine and Kolto Pack and the occasional Kolto Cloud to get that 20% healing buff, and I'm not going to be spamming emergency med pack, yeah, I've got cool head, put myself back up at high energy cost, and I can keep doing this very high level of healing. Once things have calmed down a little bit, you'll have some time to use some diagnostic scans to recuperate energy. Most of the time, single target healing doesn't need a whole bunch of burst at once, so you're just going to be using the occasional Kolto Pack and the occasional emergency med pack while refreshing your slow release med packs. Pretty simple. Use some diagnostic scans if you're low on energy. But remember, the tank, is very important that you don't abandon him and let him die because you saw a DPS take some damage. Now let's talk a little bit more about the AoE heals and how we're using our AoE heals. So one common example I run into when I'm doing a bunch of AoE healing and I'm able to stand within range of everybody, I'll cast Kolto Cloud on somebody. A lot of times I cast it on myself so that I can control the center of that radius to know I'm hitting as many targets as possible rather than on the tank. If you have the time to pick a better target than yourself, I highly suggest that. But let's just show the example on myself. So I'm going to start off with a Kolto Cloud on myself, an Underworld Medicine on myself, and generally that would be with a Pugnacity, and then I would use Hot Streak to bring Pugnacity up again and use Underworld Medicine on myself. For AoE heals in general, we're going to be using Recuperative Nanotech as much as possible with Kolto Injection cast on ourselves to heal all targets around us. Now I got 2 instant cast Underworld Medicines with a 10% Alacrity boost and a 20% Mastery boost. And then as soon as Kolto Cloud comes off cooldown, I would use it again. And this is a very, very AoE heavy damage phase where you need a lot of AoE healing. You would spam this. You can maybe do some emergency med packs to make sure that you're refreshing your slow release med packs. Generally, we're not going to be using any Kolto packs at this point because they're single target healing. And I would generally say that right now, the way the game has designed things, that even though you can use Pugnacity to make Kolto Pack an instant heal, there's a lot of compelling reasons to use Underworld Medicine with Pugnacity instead. So other ways that we can approach our heals. Obviously, Kolto Cloud, you can put that on the tank and it should hit melee DPS. Kolto Waves. We used to use Kolto Waves a lot, you almost never use it anymore. Any situation where you can use Underworld Medicine, it's going to be superior. End of story. Kolto Waves is only something I would use if I need to AoE heal targets at range. The last thing to think about a little bit when it comes to AoE healing is there are some fights where slow release med pack can be put on multiple players, 6 or more players, just to have that slow ticking hot on everybody, as you really don't need to do a lot of healing in some fights, and it's all just kind of slow and consistent. When we look at how we want to actually manage energy, this becomes a little more complicated. My philosophy is I'm not a great healer, so I don't worry about looking at my bar to figure out exactly how much energy I have and when I want to be using Diagnostic Scan instead, right? My general philosophy is as long as I've got Cool Head up, I can abuse energy. But you can see right here, the amount of energy regen went from 4 bars to 3 bars, and now it went down to 2 bars, and now it went down to 1. So the important thing to note is that you generally want to keep the 4 little chevrons of energy regen up, right? And then you can use an ability. If you see you just dip below, you're going to want to use a Diagnostic Scan if possible. So what a lot of players will tell you is they'll say, oh, you know, like, see, I'm around 73%. Well, now I'm going to want to use a Diagnostic Scan, and then I can go back to a bigger one. Oh, say I drop below 70 again, I can use a Diagnostic, and you can keep yourself floating at your max energy regen. Yeah, fuck all that. That's way too complicated. So what I do is, if people need healing, they get healing. If Cool Head is available, people get as much healing as they need if everyone's taking a lot of damage. Cool. Awesome. Don't have to worry about it. If people don't need healing, then I really think, why waste energy? If I see that everybody is doing fairly well in the group, there's not a lot of damage going out, I'm not needing to, top people up too often, I'll just revert to emergency med pack, Diagnostic Scan if someone actually needs healing, and of course, Flurry of Bolts, right? Like you can just sit there and DPS the boss with Flurry of Bolts if you want. So generally, just think about that. Do I really need to be putting out a lot of heals on somebody or not? Right? I only need to maintain my slow release med packs. The best way to do that for very low energy cost is emergency med pack occasionally. And then once you get into that heavy damage phase where suddenly you're like, oh crap, I gotta heal like crazy, you just have energy. Generally your cool head will be off cooldown, and if it's not, like, you just need to heal anyways, right? And then once that damage phase is past, like the worst, I'm just going to be using Diagnostic Scan as much as possible while trying to make sure that I refresh any slow release med packs. I'm not going to throw any new slow release med packs on at this point. So if they've fallen off and I'm really low on energy and I don't have Cool Head, I'm not going to start by throwing a whole bunch of slow release med packs on. They use too much energy. You're just going to be using Diagnostic Scan, and if they fall off, they fall off. It's not a big deal. Once you're at a more stable energy point, then you can look at refreshing these. And again, this is coming from the point of view of somebody who's not a perfect healer, not a great healer. So this is how I simplify it for myself to make it a little bit more manageable. And as you play more, you'll get more experience with this. You'll learn fights better. And that's one of the big things that makes your healing improve a lot, is learning the fight so you generally know when is there a big damage phase, when isn't there, when do I need to save certain things for, when do I need to save my energy for, etc. The other thing that I want to talk about for Scoundrel Healing is what you want to do with your user interface to make it easier to see the heals that you want to do and how those different settings will affect you. So if we pop open our interface editor and we select our operations frame here, there's a few different things. First off, I like to scale mine as large as possible. I'm going to make my debuff scale a bit larger than my buff scale because I want to see those debuffs stand out a little bit more so that I know when I need to cleanse them. The buff scale, move that down just a little bit. It really is up to you how big you want it. There's just so many buffs that players end up getting that it can be really tricky to see them, and some players will turn this down as small as possible because they don't even want to see the buffs. Groups per row. This is the idea that's saying that when you have multiple groups, how do you want them spread out? Mounted groups visible. I have it so that I can see all 6 groups if we ever enter a 24-person ops group, but if for whatever reason you don't want to be able to see all the groups, you can limit it. Just realize that you're only going to see the first 1, 2, 3, etc. Health width, I don't find this one super valuable. I do like extending it just a little bit. It's definitely helpful. It allows more rooms for those buffs and debuffs. It allows your health bar to be a bit bigger. The one that's a bigger deal to me is going to be health height. So this is one that a lot of players will use to make those health bars really nice and fat, so it's easier to see how much health the player has. Show health text, this one is quite helpful as well for some players. I don't really use it, but some players love seeing it. It gives you a percentage of their health as well as their total health that they have available to them. And as you increase the health height, you'll notice that these numbers get a little bit bigger. The last thing that a lot of players do like to use, and I tend to leave off, is show only removable debuffs. So generally this is a great idea. You only want to see the debuffs you can cleanse. That way you're not seeing any debuffs. And when somebody does need to cleanse, poof, that debuff popped up and you know, oh, that's something I can cleanse. I should cleanse it. The main reason why I don't like to play with this one is because some of the cleansable debuffs in certain fights don't show up if you have this option checked. And it's super frustrating, and I didn't want to learn a bad habit. But at the same time, it probably would make me a better healer if I just turn this on, because I also do tend to miss cleansable debuffs as a result. So once you've finished adjusting your health height, your health width, and so on, you can go back into Star Parse, unlock your overlays, and see if you need to adjust the size of your Raid HOTS overlay, and move it around as needed. So hopefully this gives you guys a lot of good ideas and a lot of good advice on the general way to heal with a scoundrel or operative healer, and hopefully this helps you a lot with trying to do better at healing people. But as I said, there's nothing that replaces the practice of actually practicing healing, because you just can't practice on a static target because you're constantly making decisions within the ops frame and the group to figure out who do I need to heal, what kind of heal should I be using, how's the best way to efficiently use less energy while still doing healing, and a lot of different things that make it quite challenging, as well as thinking about generally like, yeah, I need to know when cleanses are in a fight. Certain things are very, very important to cleanse. If I don't cleanse them, I'm going to have to heal 3 times as hard, or maybe I can't even heal through it. So let's just cover a final few tips for you about how to do your healing with a Scoundrel Operative. So we've covered the slow release med packs quite a bit. And I do want to stress the fact that generally you should be putting the slow release med packs on both tanks in the group and on yourself. You sometimes want to have more than 3 out. So look at the DPS who are most likely to take damage, most likely to rip off of the boss. Those are the ones that you're going to want to put slow release med packs on, as you're getting a bigger benefit if you're putting your slow release med packs on somebody who takes damage compared to just putting them on somebody so that you get that upper hand or tactical advantage. The reason why we like to put them on ourselves is a couple things. 1, you can use it to help keep track of your slow release med packs. And 2, as a healer, any new adds that spawn in during a fight, they generally will shoot you because you get this thing called healer aggro, because nobody else has gained any aggro yet on those adds. The other thing to think about too is how much do we actually heal from those 2 HOTS during their full duration. So if you put 2 slow release med packs on a player and you just wait, let them fall off completely, it's about 60,000 heals or about 15% of their hit points. When you see that you have DPS players who are a bit lower on health, say they're missing about a third or a quarter of their health, you're going to put your slow release med packs on them and then just refresh it with an emergency med pack. Should be enough to give them about 140,000 in heals. So the other thing you really want to think about a lot as a healer is, when do you actually heal people? When you see people take damage, it doesn't instantly mean you need to heal them. So you have a different priority list depending on who's taking damage. Obviously, when the tank who's holding a boss is taking damage, you need to be healing them, right? Like, they're going to take the most amount of consistent damage. You should always have HOTS on them. And if they're not sitting at a reasonably high health, they probably need to be healed to make sure they're topped up in case the boss has an attack that does a lot of damage and will suddenly remove a large amount of their health. That said though, as you learn the fights, you'll start to know which areas of the fight you're allowed to let their health dip a bit lower, and you don't have to stress about it right away, versus which phases you have to keep them at a higher health to mitigate that really big hit on the tank. When it comes to thinking about keeping everybody at a high health, that's kind of a bad idea. Generally, you just have to think about, I need people not to die. It's more important to keep people alive than it is to keep them at high health. If you keep people at about 70% health or higher, almost nothing will one-shot them, and you'll have time to be able to react, and you only want to swap to a DPS or somebody else when either they're getting attacked by things, or you've got some downtime and the tank doesn't need a ton of healing right now, so you can spare the time to put a few hots on that DPS and maybe throw out some AoE heals, which are slightly weaker on the tank, but will have the benefit of healing those DPS at the same time. Always make sure that you let yourself survive too. Never forget that you need healing as well, and don't let yourself die because you're too busy healing other players. A dead healer is a useless healer. Speaking of a dead healer being a useless healer, well, you have defensives. Understand how your defensives work, know when you should be using defensives, or when you just need to move away from the boss to make sure that you're not taking damage. So as a scoundrel operative healer, you will quite often play kind of like a melee player, because doing that AoE heal with Underworld Medicine is just so good and so enjoyable to do. But there will be certain times where you're like, nope, that's way too much damage, I'm gonna die, I'm never gonna be able to heal everybody and myself, so you just move away from the boss and then you just change up your healing a little bit. Thanks everybody for watching, hope you have a great day, and we'll see you in the next video.